She told me she was working late. I believed her. Or rather, I wanted to. It was Valentine's Day, and we had never been the couple to make a big deal out of it. After nearly a decade together, the grand gestures had faded into quiet comforts. Late-night takeout, an extra kiss before bed, her hand resting on mine in the middle of the night. That was love to me. Steady. Reliable. But tonight, I was alone. She had texted me an hour ago. Sorry, love. Swamped at the office. Rain check? I had responded with a simple, okay. Be safe. No questions, no doubts. And then my phone buzzed again. Not from her. It was an unknown number, a single message, with no words, just a picture. I tapped the screen, and the image filled my vision. My wife. My beautiful, loyal, hardworking wife. In another man's arms. The setting was a dimly lit restaurant, candles flickering between them. Her head was tilted, her lips parted in laughter. The same laugh she used to reserve for me. His hand was resting on her thigh, his fingers pressing into fabric that I had no doubt would later end up on his bedroom floor. I stared at the photo for a long time, my pulse a slow, steady drumbeat in my ears. There was no anger at first, just a strange kind of clarity, like watching the final pieces of a puzzle snap into place. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the way she had started pulling away from my touch, always just a fraction of an inch, but enough for me to feel it. I should have seen this coming, but I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. If she thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. I put my phone down, stood up, and grabbed my keys. Tonight, I wasn't going to be the oblivious husband sitting at home. Tonight, I was going to be the one watching from the shadows. And when the time was right, she was going to learn exactly what happens when you betray the man who knows you better than anyone. I didn't go straight to the restaurant. That would have been reckless. Stupid. Instead, I sat in my car, fingers drumming against the steering wheel, forcing myself to think, to plan. The photo had been sent anonymously. No name, no message, just cold, hard proof that my wife was lying to me. But why would someone send this to me? A friend? A stranger? Or maybe him? I glanced at my phone again, the image still burning on the screen. The man was unfamiliar, tall, sharp-jawed, well-dressed. The kind of guy who looked like he had never had to beg for anything in his life. And now, here he was, taking something that belonged to me. I swallowed the rage, pushing it down where it couldn't control me. If I walked in there now, I'd be doing exactly what she expected. Losing my temper, demanding answers, making a scene. No, that was too easy, too merciful. Instead, I typed a reply to my wife's last message. Me, no worries, sweetheart. I'll wait up for you. I miss you. I stared at the words, letting them sink in before hitting send. She had no idea that I knew. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway, my destination clear. Tonight, I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to let her think she got away with it. And then, when she least expected it, I'd take everything. The restaurant. I parked 2 blocks away. Close enough to watch, but far enough to be invisible. The restaurant was high-end, the kind of place we used to go to before she started making excuses, before late nights at work became more common than date nights with me. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I spotted them instantly. My wife looked stunning. She had taken the time to curl her hair, to wear the red dress I had bought her last year for our anniversary. The same dress she had claimed she didn't feel like wearing when I had planned a dinner last month. And now she was wearing it for him. I clenched my jaw but stayed still. Emotion was my enemy right now. She leaned in closer to him, her fingers grazing his wrist, her lips curving into a smile I hadn't seen in months. He whispered something in her ear, and she laughed, the kind of laugh that used to be mine. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone, activated the camera, and started recording. Let's see how much she laughed when she saw this playing in our living room tomorrow morning. The long game. I didn't follow her home that night. I wanted to, more than anything. I wanted to watch her sneak back into our bed, wrap her arms around me like nothing had happened. I wanted to hear whatever excuse she would give me in the morning about why she was so tired, why she smelled like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. But patience was key. Instead, I drove home, poured myself a drink, and reviewed the footage. Every smile, every touch, every stolen moment she thought was secret. I saved it all. Tomorrow, she'd wake up thinking she had fooled me. Tomorrow, she'd have no idea that I had already won. The next morning, she woke up in my arms. It was almost laughable. I had watched her creep into the house last night, slipping off her heels at the door like she always did, thinking she was being quiet. I pretended to be asleep as she slid under the covers, her body curling into mine, her breath warm against my neck. She had just spent the evening in another man's arms. And now, here she was, pretending like nothing had happened. I tightened my grip around her waist, pressing a lazy kiss to the top of her head. She hummed softly, shifting closer. You have no idea what's coming, sweetheart. Breakfast and lies. I played my part well. I woke up early and made breakfast. Eggs, toast, her favorite vanilla latte with just the right amount of foam. She came downstairs in her robe, stretching, looking every bit the devoted wife. Morning, she murmured, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Morning, beautiful, I said, my voice smooth, steady. How'd you sleep? She smiled, sitting down at the table. Good. Work was exhausting, though. Work. I had to resist the urge to laugh. She had spent last night tangled up with another man, and she was sitting here, sipping coffee, lying to my face. I slid into the chair across from her, watching her closely. Yeah? What time did you get home? She didn't even hesitate. Late. Around midnight, I think. She yawned, rubbing her eyes. I was so tired I just crashed. Midnight. I had the timestamp on my video. She had still been with him at 12:30. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was deliberate. Poor thing, I said, reaching across the table to brush my thumb over her hand. I hate that work keeps you so busy. She sighed, squeezing my fingers. Me too, but it'll get better soon. I smiled. I'm sure it will. Because by tomorrow, you won't have a husband anymore. The setup. After breakfast, I kissed her goodbye and told her I had errands to run. That was true in a way. First stop? A lawyer. I wanted everything lined up before I set the trap. I wasn't going to walk away from this marriage empty-handed. Not after everything I had given her. Everything she had thrown away for some cheap affair. Second stop? A print shop. I had the photos printed, crisp, high quality, undeniable. Her smiling at him, his hand on her thigh. The moment before their lips met. Evidence. Undeniable, inescapable evidence. By the time I got home, I had everything I needed. Tomorrow was Valentine's Day. She thought she was getting a romantic surprise. She was. Just not the kind she'd been expecting. Valentine's Day. A day of love. A day of devotion. A day of celebrating the person who means everything to you. For my wife, it would be the day she lost everything. The calm before the storm. She was glowing when she came downstairs that morning, wrapped in a silky robe, hair still damp from the shower. She looked every bit the perfect wife. She stretched, kissed my cheek, and smiled like she wasn't the worst kind of liar. Happy Valentine's Day, baby, she murmured. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. Happy Valentine's Day, sweetheart. She had no idea. I played my role flawlessly, acting like the devoted husband. I had already left a small gift on the kitchen counter, chocolate-covered strawberries, a bottle of wine, and a card that read, "Tonight will be unforgettable." She laughed softly when she saw it, biting her lip in excitement. You really didn't have to. Oh, but I did. You deserve it, I said, brushing my lips over hers. She kissed me back without hesitation, and I swallowed the disgust that threatened to rise. I wanted to see how far she would go. How long she would keep up the lie. Would she sneak away again tonight? Use the same pathetic excuse? I watched her read the card again, something flickering behind her eyes. Guilt? Doubt? Good. Let it simmer. Because the moment of truth was coming. The final lie. She left for work around 6, dressed to kill in a black dress that clung to her in all the ways I used to love. Don't wait up, she teased, winking as she grabbed her purse. Meetings might run late again. I smiled, pressing a long, slow kiss to her lips. Of course, baby. Work comes first. She kissed me one last time before walking out the door, leaving behind the scent of vanilla and betrayal. The second she was gone, I moved. I grabbed my car keys, my phone, and the folder of evidence. I wasn't just following her tonight. I was going to catch her in the act. And this time, she wouldn't just be lying to me. She'd be lying to herself. The chase. I stayed a few cars behind her as she drove across the city, taking a route that had become all too familiar. Her office was in the opposite direction. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a hotel. A fucking hotel. My stomach twisted as she stepped out of the car, flipping her hair over her shoulder as she walked inside. She looked confident, excited, like she was going to spend the most romantic night of her life. Too bad she had no idea I was watching. I parked nearby, turning off my headlights. My pulse was slow, steady. No hesitation. No second-guessing. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Her walking through the entrance. Her checking in at the front desk. Her waiting for the elevator, smiling at the text she had just received. I could only imagine what it said. Can't wait to see you, baby. Wish I could spend the whole night with you. I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath. She had made her choice. Now, it was time for her to live with it. Tomorrow morning, she'd wake up thinking she had gotten away with it. She'd return home expecting breakfast, flowers, maybe even a gift. And I would be waiting. With everything. The photos. The videos. The truth. She wanted an unforgettable Valentine's Day. She was about to get one. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I sat in the dark with a drink in my hand, watching the clock tick toward dawn, replaying every second of the video I had taken. The way she smiled at him. The way she reached for his hand as they stepped into the elevator together. The way she looked happier with him than she had with me in years. She thought she had one. That thought almost made me laugh. She would come home today, stretching like a cat who had spent the night in someone else's bed, thinking I was still the fool she had been lying to for months. But this time, I would be the one lying to her. The setup. I arranged everything perfectly. The dining table was set for two. A beautiful breakfast, fluffy pancakes, freshly brewed coffee, her favorite blueberry jam. A bouquet of red roses in the center, petals carefully arranged. Everything was picture perfect, down to the smallest detail. And right next to her plate, where she'd expect to find a wrapped gift, was something much better. The folder. Inside, the printed photos of her with him. The screenshots of her texts, pulled from the software I had installed on her phone weeks ago. And, at the very top, a USB drive containing every second of the footage I had recorded. She wanted romance? She wanted a special moment? She was about to get one she'd never forget. The return of the wife. At exactly 8:12 a.m., I heard her key in the door. Right on time. I stayed in the kitchen, pouring coffee, acting like the devoted husband I had always been. She walked in, her heels clicking against the floor, a smug little smile tugging at her lips. She sighed, setting her purse down. Something smells amazing. I turned, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Happy Valentine's Day, sweetheart. She walked up to me, pressing her lips to mine. I kissed her back. She had no idea that I knew whose lips had been on hers just hours ago. Happy Valentine's Day, she murmured, stretching her arms above her head. You're amazing, you know that? Doing all of this for me? She gestured to the table, eyes lighting up at the sight of the roses. I feel so spoiled. Oh, you should, I said, nodding toward her seat. I wanted to make this morning unforgettable. She grinned, sitting down, completely unaware of what was waiting for her. And then, she saw it. The moment her fingers touched the folder, her expression shifted. Confusion. A pause. Then, as she slowly opened it and saw what was inside, pure, unfiltered panic. Her breath hitched. Her face drained of color. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, scanning the photos. Then, she reached the USB drive. I watched her, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Something wrong, sweetheart? She looked up at me, eyes wide with terror. I don't understand. Oh, I think you do. Silence. Her mouth opened and closed like she was struggling for air. This isn't. I can explain. Explain? I chuckled, shaking my head. Please. I'd love to hear how you're going to explain spending Valentine's Day in another man's bed. She swallowed hard, her entire body rigid. It's not what it looks like. There it was. The oldest lie in the book. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. You sure about that? Because it looks like you were having the time of your life. And I have every second of it recorded. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was cornered, trapped. Checkmate. The collapse. Tears welled in her eyes. Baby, please. Don't. I stood up, staring down at her. I don't want to hear your bullshit. I don't want your excuses. You made your choice. She shook her head frantically, reaching for my hand. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking. I love you. I pulled away, my stomach twisting with disgust. No, you don't. Her lip quivered. I do. I swear. He meant nothing. I laughed coldly. He meant nothing? That's interesting because I'm pretty sure you spent the entire night proving otherwise. Her tears spilled over, panic radiating from her in waves. We can fix this. We can. There is no we anymore. Silence. I exhaled slowly, pushing back the overwhelming mix of rage and relief. I already called a lawyer. The papers will be ready by the end of the week. Her breath hitched. A lawyer? Yes, a divorce lawyer. I met her eyes, letting the final blow sink in. And just so we're clear, I'm taking everything. Her face crumpled. You wouldn't. Oh, I would. I smirked, grabbing my coat from the chair. Your little affair? It's going to cost you everything. She let out a strangled sob, burying her face in her hands. I didn't care. I didn't feel anything anymore. I grabbed my keys, walking toward the door. Before stepping out, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. Enjoy your breakfast, sweetheart. And with that, I walked away, free. The moment I stepped outside, I took a deep breath. The air was crisp, the early morning sun casting a golden glow over the street. It was strange, how the world kept moving, how nothing had changed out here, while inside that house, my marriage was burning to the ground. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could still hear her crying, soft, muffled sobs behind the closed door. She deserved worse. But I had no more words for her. Calling the shots. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The adrenaline was still there, thrumming under my skin, but something else was creeping in too, something heavier. It was over. Just like that. I had spent months knowing, watching, waiting, planning. And now? Now I was free. I pulled out my phone and made the call. A deep, steady voice answered. Mr. Carter. Morning, I said, my voice even. I assume everything's ready? Yes, sir. The paperwork is finalized. We'll serve her the divorce petition this afternoon. A pause. As for the assets, you'll retain control of the house and all joint accounts, as per the documents you signed. Given the evidence, she won't have much room to fight it. Perfect. I had spent the last week ensuring she wouldn't walk away from this with a single dime more than she deserved. She had broken her vows. I was breaking her entire life. Good, I said, exhaling slowly. Let's move forward. I hung up before he could say anything else. Step 1, done. The first message. I sat in my car for a few more minutes before I pulled up my texts. I knew exactly who I was looking for. I found the unknown number, the one that had first sent me the photo of her and her lover, the one that had set this entire thing in motion. I still didn't know who had sent it, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I typed a message. Me, you knew. You saw. Who are you? A few minutes passed. Then, finally, a response. Unknown number, meet me at 10 a.m. Coffee shop on 5th. I stared at the screen. No name, no details, just a time and a place. I smirked. Well, this just got interesting. The meeting. I arrived at the coffee shop at exactly 10 a.m., scanning the crowd. And then, I saw him, sitting in the corner, sipping a black coffee like he had no care in the world. Was him. The man from the photo. The man who had spent last night with my wife. The man she had betrayed me for. What the hell? I walked over, my steps slow, deliberate. He looked up, his face unreadable. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly. I didn't sit. "Not yet. So it was you." A small smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Guilty." I clenched my jaw. "You sent me that photo?" He nodded, taking another sip of coffee. "I did." I stared at him, waiting for the rage to hit me. But all I felt was confusion. "Why?" I asked coldly. He leaned back in his chair, watching me carefully. "Because," he said simply, "I wanted you to know the truth." I narrowed my eyes. "You could have kept screwing my wife behind my back. She clearly didn't mind lying to me. So why tell me?" He exhaled slowly, setting his cup down. "Because," he said, "I wasn't the only one." Silence. A slow, sinking feeling settled in my gut. I leaned forward, my voice low. "Explain. Now." He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "She wasn't just cheating with me, Carter." I felt my heartbeat in my ears. "She was seeing at least 2 other men." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. 2 more men. A bitter laugh escaped me, though there was nothing funny about it. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I found out a week ago. Saw some texts on her phone. Messages from guys I'd never even heard of. Turns out, she was playing all of us." A deep, cold rage coiled inside me. I had spent months thinking this was just one betrayal. But the woman I had loved, the woman I had married, the woman I had spent years building a life with, she had been lying to me from the very beginning. The realization. I sat back, the weight of it all pressing down on me. For so long, I had thought this was a simple case of one mistake, one moment of weakness, one affair. But no, it had never been about one man. It had never been about love, or passion, or boredom. It was about her. She had never been faithful. Not truly. She had been lying to me for longer than I even knew. And now, she was about to lose everything. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around the coffee cup. "You were right to tell me," I said finally. "You did me a favor." The man across from me nodded. "Glad to hear it." I stood up. "One last question." He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." I met his gaze, my voice cold. "Where do the other 2 live?" His smirk returned. "Why? Planning a reunion?" I didn't smile back. I had a few more loose ends to tie up. And my wife wasn't the only one who was about to have a very bad day. I walked out of that coffee shop with a new kind of clarity. For months, I had been drowning in anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. But now I felt something else entirely. Control. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was choosing what happened next. And that started with meeting the other men. The first bastard. The first guy, Daniel, was easy to find. The man from the coffee shop, Eric, had given me an address. An upscale apartment in the city. Not just some fling then. She had gone for someone with money. I waited until the late afternoon before I knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Daniel was younger than me, maybe early 30s. Athletic, sharp-dressed, with the kind of self-assured confidence that came with never having had his heart broken. Until now. He frowned. "Can I help you?" I smiled. "Yeah. You've been sleeping with my wife." His face paled. "What?" I shoved the folder of photos into his hands. "Save the bullshit. Look for yourself." He hesitated, then flipped it open. His entire expression changed. Shock, then guilt, then rage. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "I didn't know she was married." I watched him carefully. "You sure about that?" He nodded, his jaw tight. "She told me she was single, that her ex was controlling." Controlling. I let out a bitter laugh. "That's rich." Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I should have known something was off. She was always secretive, always dodging questions about her past. He looked back at me. "You already left her?" "Divorce papers are on the way," I said. "And she's losing everything." He let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "She deserves it." I didn't disagree. I turned to leave, but before I could, Daniel spoke again. "There's something else," he said slowly. I glanced back. "What?" "She's been taking money from me." "Oh, hell no." I stiffened. "What do you mean?" Daniel clenched his jaw. She borrowed thousands. Told me she was investing in something. Said she'd pay me back. I thought I was helping her start over. I exhaled through my nose, fury simmering beneath my skin. She wasn't just cheating. She was using them. Using all of us. I shook my head. You're never getting that money back. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. I figured as much. Then his expression hardened. But I'll make sure she never gets another cent from me. Good. One down. One more to go. The last one. The third man, Adam, was a different story. I tracked him down at the bar where he worked. Unlike Daniel, he wasn't rich. He was young, mid-20s at best. A bartender with a cocky smirk and a reputation for charming his way into women's beds. And my wife had fallen for it. I sat at the bar, waiting until he noticed me. When he finally came over, he gave me an easy grin. What can I get you, man? I slid a photo across the counter. He looked down at it, then back at me. His smirk faded. You know who I am? I asked. He swallowed. Yeah, he admitted. I do. I tilted my head. And you didn't care? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man, I didn't know at first. But yeah, I figured it out. I went still. And you kept screwing her anyway? His jaw tightened. She told me your marriage was dead. That you were just roommates. He exhaled. I know that doesn't excuse it. No, I said calmly. It doesn't. We stared at each other. He was the first one who had known and still gone through with it. And yet, looking at him now, I didn't see a man worth my rage. I just saw a kid who had fallen for the wrong woman. I shook my head. You're not even the worst part of this, I admitted. Adam gave me a humorless smile. Glad to hear it. I stood up, grabbing my coat. You might want to block her number. He nodded. Already did. Good. That was the last loose end. Now all that was left was her. The final goodbye. When I got home, she was still there. She looked up from the couch as I stepped inside, eyes red-rimmed from crying. Where were you? She asked, her voice small. I tossed my keys onto the counter. Cleaning up your mess. She flinched. I stared at her for a long moment. This woman, the one I had built my life around, the one I had trusted, loved, defended, she was nothing to me now. I should have hated her, but all I felt was emptiness. She stood up, wringing her hands. Ethan, please. We can talk about this. I let out a cold, humorless laugh. Talk? About what? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew. There was nothing left to say. I grabbed the envelope from the table, the divorce papers my lawyer had dropped off. I tossed them onto the couch beside her. You have two choices, I said, my voice deadly calm. Sign them, or fight me in court and lose everything. She hesitated, her hands trembling. You really won't forgive me? I laughed softly. Sweetheart, I said, mocking the way she used to say it to me, you didn't just cheat on me. I leaned in close, lowering my voice to a whisper. You made me a fucking fool. She swallowed hard. I straightened, stepping back, signed the papers. And then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door. This time, for good. I didn't look back. Not when I stepped outside. Not when I got into my car. Not when I drove away from the house that had once been ours. Because it wasn't ours anymore. It was just hers. A graveyard of a marriage. A shrine to everything she had destroyed. And I wasn't going to spend another second mourning it. The last goodbye. I checked my phone as I pulled into a parking lot near the waterfront. No messages from her. Good. Either she had finally realized there was nothing left to say, or she was still inside, staring at those divorce papers, trying to figure out how everything had collapsed around her in a single day. I hoped she cried. I hoped she felt every ounce of the betrayal she had shoved down my throat for months. And I hoped, for just a moment, she understood the truth. She never deserved me. I turned my phone over in my hand. I could feel it. This pull, this lingering temptation to call someone, to talk about it, to unload everything. But who would I even call? The friends we had? They were our friends. She had entangled herself so deeply in every part of my life that I wasn't even sure which relationships were mine and which had just been hers by extension. And my family? My sister, my parents? They had always been there for me, But did I really want them to hear me like this? No. I needed to breathe. I needed silence. I got out of the car and walked toward the water. The cold air burned against my skin, but I welcomed it. It made me feel awake, alive, and I hadn't felt that in a long, long time. A familiar number. I was standing near the railing, staring at the waves, when my phone buzzed. Not her. Not the lawyer. Not one of the men she had betrayed me with. It was him, Eric, the first man, the one who had sent me the picture, the one who had blown her lies apart. I hesitated. Then I answered. Did she sign? He asked. No greeting. No small talk. I smirked. Haven't checked. But I left the papers on the couch. A low chuckle on the other end. Good. I'll be surprised if she fights it. I exhaled. Why'd you call? A pause. Then, she did the same thing to me, you know? I frowned. What? She cheated on me too, Eric said, his voice quieter now. Not just with you. With another guy before you. That's how I found out about her. Thought I was in love with her. Thought she was real. I swallowed hard. So it wasn't just me. She had done this before. Destroyed someone else's life before she started wrecking mine. Eric exhaled. I'm not saying this to make you feel better. Just thought you should know. You weren't the first. And you probably won't be the last. I let the words settle over me. I should have felt angrier. But instead, I just felt tired. She'll move on fast, Eric continued. She always does. But she'll never really be happy. I smirked. I know. A pause. Then Eric sighed. Listen, I don't know where your head's at, but if you ever want to grab a drink, let me know. I raised an eyebrow. You want to have a drink with the husband of the woman you were screwing? A low chuckle. Call it mutual suffering. I considered it. Then, to my own surprise, I said, maybe. We hung up. I stood there for a long time, staring at the ocean. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about me. And what the hell I was going to do with this new, unexpected freedom. I had expected relief. When I left the house, when I walked away from her, from everything we had built, I had expected some great exhale, a sense of weight lifting, of breaking free. But that's the thing about being caged for so long. Even when the door is open, you don't always know what to do with your freedom. The first night alone, I checked into a hotel that evening, not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand the thought of being in our house for even one more night. It wasn't ours anymore. It never had been. Everything in that place was a lie. The furniture, the framed photos on the walls, the dishes in the sink. Just remnants of a life she had been faking for years. So I left. The hotel room was small, just a king-sized bed, a desk, and a television. It smelled like citrus-scented cleaning spray and fresh linens. Nothing familiar. And that was what I needed. Something new. Something untouched by her. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Eric's number was still there. I could call him, meet up, drink until none of this felt real. Or I could call someone else. A different voice. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for a name I hadn't said in a long time. Lena. She was an old friend. One of the few I had before my wife slowly cut me off from everyone who wasn't hers. Lena had always been sharp, unapologetic, the kind of woman who didn't waste time with bullshit. And she had always seen through my wife. She's not who you think she is, she had told me once, years ago, when she was still trying to warn me. Be careful, Ethan. I hadn't listened. Now I wished I had. I stared at her name for a long moment. Then I hit call. It rang twice before she answered. Ethan? Her voice was cautious, surprised. Yeah, I said. It's me. Silence. Then, quietly, she finally did it, didn't she? I let out a breathless laugh. Yeah, she did. Lena sighed. Where are you? Hotel on 5th. Have you eaten? I frowned. What? I know you, Ethan, she said. You've been running on coffee and revenge. That's not a diet. Despite everything, I smiled. Same, Lena. I leaned back against the pillows. So what? You gonna come babysit me? Damn right I am, she said. Sit tight. I'm bringing food. And just like that, for the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't alone. A familiar face. Lena showed up an hour later with takeout bags and no sympathy. She dropped the food onto the bed and gave me a once-over, her sharp brown eyes scanning my face. "You look like hell." "Thanks." She smirked. "You're welcome." We sat cross-legged on the bed, eating in silence for a while. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I started eating. "You're really out," she said eventually. I nodded. "Yeah." Papers are in her hands. Lena shook her head, exhaling. "Took you long enough." I raised an eyebrow. "You knew?" She scoffed. "Of course I knew." She set down her chopsticks, leaning against the headboard. "Ethan, I've known for years. But you wouldn't listen." She wasn't wrong. I sighed. "How bad was it?" She tilted her head. "You want the truth?" "Always." She studied me for a moment before speaking. "She was playing you from the start. I don't think she ever planned on staying loyal. You were just safe. A good man. The kind who would take care of her while she did whatever the hell she wanted." I clenched my jaw. "And you never told me?" "I did," she said flatly. "You just didn't want to hear it." I looked down at my food, appetite fading. She was right. I had been blind. Willingly. Lena nudged my knee with her foot. "Hey." I glanced up. "You're free now," she said. "You get to decide what comes next. No more lies. No more games." I exhaled. "And what if I don't know what comes next?" Lena smirked. "Then we figure it out." And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed her. For the first time in years, I woke up with no weight on my chest. No suspicion. No dread. No wondering where she was, who she was texting, what lie she would tell me today. I was free. And I had no idea what to do with that freedom. The first morning without her, Lena was still asleep on the couch. She had refused to leave the night before, claiming I was too emotionally stunted to be left alone in a hotel room like some tragic movie character. Her words, not mine. I smirked as I poured coffee, the scent filling the small hotel room. She stirred, groaning as she sat up. "God, what time is it?" 7. Lena blinked at me. 7? What the hell is wrong with you? I chuckled, sliding a cup toward her. "Couldn't sleep in." She took the coffee and sipped it, watching me over the rim of her mug. "So, what's the plan?" I leaned against the counter. "For today?" "For your life, dumbass." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "No idea." Lena studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Good. That means anything is possible." I scoffed. "Is that your inspirational wisdom for the day?" She smirked. "You bet your ass it is." The divorce papers. At noon, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "Wife, soon-to-be ex." I signed. Just like that. No apology. No plea to fix things. Just 2 words. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. "Me good." And then I blocked her number. For good. What now? By the time the sun set, I had a one-way ticket out of town. A new city. A fresh start. Lena raised an eyebrow when I told her. "So you're just leaving?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I have to." She crossed her arms. "And what if running away doesn't fix anything?" I smirked. "Then at least I'll be running somewhere new." She stared at me for a long moment before sighing. "Fine, but I'm visiting. And if I find out you've turned into some brooding loner, I'm dragging your ass back." I chuckled. "Noted." She held out her pinky. "Promise me." I hesitated. Then I hooked my pinky around hers. "I promise." The road ahead. The night before I left, I sat on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city I had called home for so many years. Everything here was tainted by her. Every street, every restaurant, every memory. But as I stared at the skyline, I realized something. She had taken my past, but she would never have my future. I was done mourning what I had lost. It was time to figure out who the hell I was without her. And for the first time in a long time, that idea didn't scare me. It excited me. The day I left town, I didn't tell anyone but Lena. No dramatic goodbyes. No sentimental last looks at the places I used to love. Just a packed bag, a full tank of gas, and the road ahead. It wasn't running away. It was starting over. Miles away from her. I drove for hours, the city shrinking behind me in the rearview mirror. No more passing the cafe where we used to sit on lazy Sunday mornings. No more avoiding the restaurant where I first took her on a date. No more driving past our house and feeling like a stranger inside my own life. She was behind me now. Forever. The realization hit me somewhere along the open highway, where the sky stretched wide and endless. I could be anyone, go anywhere, do anything. And for the first time, I felt weightless. A new city, a new beginning. By the time I arrived at my destination, a coastal town, quiet but alive, I had made a promise to myself. No more looking back. I found a small apartment, nothing fancy, just mine. Signed up for a gym membership, not to impress anyone, just to remind myself what strength felt like. Got a job. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to build something again. And every night, as I lay in bed, I didn't think about her. Didn't wonder if she missed me. Didn't check my phone for messages I knew would never come. She wasn't part of this life. And I was finally okay with that. A chance encounter. It happened 2 weeks later. I was at a bookstore, something I hadn't done in years. She had never been a reader. She used to say, "Why waste time on books when we could be out doing something fun?" But here, surrounded by the scent of paper and ink, I felt at peace. And then, I saw her. Not her, not my ex. Someone else. She was standing by the classics section, flipping through the pages of an old, worn copy of The Great Gatsby. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun. A tattoo peeked from beneath the sleeve of her sweater. She was mouthing the words as she read, completely lost in the pages. I had no reason to talk to her. No reason to even look twice. But for some reason, I did. Maybe because she was the first woman I had seen in months who wasn't a reminder of my past. Maybe because she was the first woman who made me curious instead of angry. Maybe because, for the first time since my marriage collapsed, I actually wanted to meet someone new. The first conversation. I hesitated before stepping closer. Then, with a deep breath, I said, I never really got the hype about Gatsby. She glanced up, her deep brown eyes flicking to mine. Oh. I shrugged. Just seems depressing. A guy spends his whole life chasing someone who doesn't deserve him. And in the end, it destroys him. She smirked. Maybe that's the point. Tragic endings? Learning to let go. I stared at her for a moment, something unspoken passing between us. Then, she held out the book. Maybe you should read it again. You might see it differently now. I took it, not because I wanted to read it, but because, for the first time in a long time, I wanted to see where something new might lead. I took the book, not because I needed another reminder of broken love stories. I had lived one. Not because I wanted to drown in metaphors about longing and loss. I had already done that. I took it because it was the first thing in a long time that didn't feel like a mistake. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. A different kind of beginning. She watched me with quiet amusement as I flipped through the pages, pretending to consider it. "You don't have to take it," she said, her lips curving into something just shy of a smirk. "I can tell you're skeptical." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm giving it a chance." She crossed her arms. "Are you?" I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. "Fine. I'll read it. Promise." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She didn't know me. She didn't know what I had been through, the weight I had carried, the things I had walked away from. She didn't know that a few weeks ago, I had been a different man entirely, a man drowning in someone else's betrayal. She didn't know that I was still learning how to exist outside of that. But for some reason, none of that mattered. She was here. Now. And so was I. "I promise," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. Moving forward. I didn't fall in love with her that night. There was no cinematic moment, no grand realization that she was the person I had been waiting for all along. That wasn't what I needed. What I needed was this. The slow, quiet process of becoming someone new. Of rebuilding. Of learning to trust the world again. Not just other people, but myself. The past would always be there, but it wasn't my anchor anymore. It was just a story. A closed book. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to start writing a new one. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.